now we're going to flip the script, and I'm going to be in the position of being interviewed. We're doing this so that he can ask the kinds of questions that a senior engineer would ask you when you are being interviewed for specifically a coding interview. Now, we're going to use the whiteboard as the canvas for the coding interview. You might be asked to do this virtually, either online. But why don't you take it away and tell us what we'll be doing today?
I have the boss mic now. So normally in these situations, the most important thing to remember is just to keep calm. Someone is not looking to embarrass you. They're looking to see how your brain works. So getting an answer wrong is not actually wrong. What's really, really bad is for you to stutter and get stuck and to not ask questions. So this is a very classic example I'm going to give my friend here now. I'm going to ask him the FizzBuzz question. Again, this is not something to see how well you code. This is just to see if you can code. And it works like this. Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
So I wanted to just kind of get some kind of technical knowledge from you and maybe ask you some programming problems. And
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, happy to do it.
Okay, so I want you to write me a method in Java. Is Java the language you're?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay, so why don't you write a method in Java that will iterate between, let's say, 1 and 100, and go through those numbers and write the word fizz if it's a multiple of 3,
Okay.
and write the word buzz if it's a multiple of 5.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely do that. So just to reiterate, you're saying that you want me to print out or log the numbers 1 through 100, and if it's divisible by 3, fizz. If it's divisible by 5, buzz.
Now notice what he did right there, and this is very important. Reiterating the question. It's very easy for someone to say something that's misinterpreted and for you to start looking like a poor performer just because you were given a question that was vague or unclear. This also gives you a sense of stalling to kind of redefine how you might solve the problem in your head by reiterating through and just being very clear and, again, giving yourself some time.
And for me, it was also an opportunity to kind of paraphrase and put it into my own words so that I knew I was clear on it. Okay, so I'm going to start. So you wanted a method. Let's say we'll just make it public. It's not going to return anything because we're going to print everything or log it. So public void, I'm going to call it something fun like fizzy buzzer. And we're not taking anything in. I'm going to use a for loop to iterate through the numbers. So no parameters, and pardon my curly braces.
That's all right.
Okay, so now let's see. We've got our method. Let's write a for loop. And right now, as I'm kind of writing the for loop, I need to be very clear about this syntax. I cannot mess up a for loop. I cannot mess up a conditional statement. That's got to be so obvious and easy. If I miss a semicolon, that's not a good thing. So really get comfortable with writing these out over and over and over again.
Actually, just a moment of correction. Semicolon is okay because that's a mistake. Not knowing how a for loop works is absolutely something that is a mistake. If he misses all semicolons, that's totally a mistake. So it's really about the things that you do all the time, making sure those are things that you can obviously perform.
Yeah, and actually just another addendum to that is I don't want to be thinking about the semicolons. So I want to have this well-practiced, well-rehearsed. So I just don't want to be thinking, oh, wait, what comes first in the for loop? Is it the initialization of the index variable, or is it, the range? Is it like, you just don't want to be thinking about that kind of stuff. So have that down. Okay, so for loop, I like to use I, so let me just create, I'll initialize an index. You said starting with 1, right?
Yes, that's right. Start at 1 and go to 100.
Go to 100, okay. So notice how I got him to repeat that, so it gives me a little bit more time. Okay, so then I was going to be less than equal to 100, and then we want to just increment I. Okay, so for loop, and so So now, let me see. I'm thinking, at this point I'm thinking, okay, I need to know what my order of operations is. I haven't quite figured it out yet. So I'm going to ask a question to kind of stall and pause. Or at least talk out through, maybe if I don't have a question, I'm just going to talk through what I'm thinking so that I don't leave dead air. Dead air is very awkward, right?
Yeah, again, no crickets. No crickets in the interview. That's not a good idea. Anything that you do to interact with me gives me more insight and comfortability to working with you and knowing that you're not going to get stalled if I were to give you some problem in the future and not have supervision over how you solve a problem.
Right. So, for instance, let's just see what crickets is like. If I'm thinking about it, this is what it looks like. Okay, so I've written my for loop, and okay. It's very awkward, right? So this is what it looks like if I'm actually just talking through it. Okay, so I've written my for loop, and now I'm going to need some conditional statement. I'm going to use an if statement, and I need to make sure the order of operations is correct so that I end up printing out exactly what you've asked for. I'm going to start just with the condition that the divisible by 3, no remainder. So if we've got I, and I'm going to use the modulo operator. Now, if you don't know the modulo operator, learn it.
Or watch this trick. Ask me as though you had no idea how to actually figure that out.
Okay, so before that's even written. Okay, so if, we need to make sure that it's divisible by 3.
Why don't you use the modulo operator?
Just by stalling, you might get some information. So I could say, so I need to know it's divisible by 3. I could also say something like, which, is there any specific method or operator you'd like me to use?
Why don't you try using the modulo operator?
Oh, what's the modulo operator?
Now, you see what he just did is he's now requesting information from me in a way that he doesn't actually need to feel embarrassed about not having that knowledge. There's so many things out there, and if somebody gives you a gotcha with something like that, just be curious and follow up. Oh, well, it's an operator that if you put it like right after, it'll actually give you the remainder of something that is divided by.
Okay. Now I have some information. I can either use that, apply that information in real time, or I can figure out what to do with that. But at least I've asked for some information. Be careful though, don't do this all the time, because if you don't know at least a handful or group of knowledge, you're going to come across as like, well, maybe you should know that kind of stuff before you come to one of these interviews. So just play it by ear, practice. The modulo operator is something that you should know, especially because you're watching it be used right now. So I'm going to use a modulo operator, I modulo 3. So if that is equal to 0, that's going to be divisible by 3, no remainder. And so under that condition, what we would like to do is just log that statement that you said earlier, which is fizz. And yeah.
Oh, that's good. I don't see log being defined here. Did you mean to use a lowercase l?
Yes. Sorry, that should be capital L so that I get the package.
So this is another important thing where that's a mistake. That isn't something that his lack of knowledge was in some type of confusion about, right? He made an honest mistake. Don't worry about making those. Everybody knows that he meant L with a capital L. However, I pointed it out just to make sure, right? And you might get asked that kind of stuff, so don't worry about your mistakes. Just try not to make the whole thing a collection of mistakes.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got that. Now I'm going to need a condition for if it's divisible by 5. So let's start with another if statement. And we have I modulo 5 this time. And again, this is very similar to the one above, so I'm just going to do that and capital L log. And now we want buzz. Notice I'm still talking as I'm kind of writing it, just to make sure that I'm not leaving any dead space. Okay, so we've got...
So now, at this point in the process, you've seen that he's solved the problem, but what's going to happen in this particular type of interview, especially if you answer something very quick, is you're going to now be thrown curveballs. Hey, without actually writing the code, just how would you maybe change this if I wanted it to do something different for when something was both divisible by 3 and 5? Because right here it looks like you'll definitely print the same thing for 15, but what if I wanted 15 to kind of be different?
Okay, so then I'd have to kind of change my operation. So you're saying like you want fizz buzz printed in the same line as opposed to fizz and then buzz. Okay, so again, I reiterate what he's asking for. And now I'm thinking, okay, well, if I go through this, I start thinking through the logic. If I go through this, then yeah, you're right, it's just going to say fizz when it's 3, it's going to say buzz when it's 5, but if it's divisible by like 15, you're saying you want something different. Okay, so I'd have to check for that condition, I think, before I check for these two. Otherwise, I'm going to print 3 things, yeah. Okay, so
look, I don't even want to hear him do anything more. The thing that he pointed out to me was the ability to look at process logic. I asked him another condition. He said, well, this is what I would have to be concerned about. We're now having a conversation that is actually about programming and the technical challenges of those things. You won't always get something as easy as FizzBuzz, but if you use these particular techniques of how to maneuver that interview, and remember to breathe and be calm in these things, you're going to find that you actually can gather a lot of confidence in an incredibly challenging technical interview, even without necessarily knowing every single thing there is to know.
And one more thing, if you can catch your mistakes before your interviewer does, that's fantastic. So one thing that I just noticed here about my code is nowhere in here am I actually printing the number, and I believe that's what he asked me to do. So before he catches me saying that, or before he catches me and asks me about that, I got to look at this and say, oh, actually, I forgot to print the number, and that's going to have to definitely go in here first. Then that's how you do a coding interview.